Welcome to Pulp Fictions with Jack and Mark. Here on the podcast, we love Pulp Fiction in all its forms, whether it be schlocky sci-fi, goofy fantasy, or gross-out horror. Each week, we like to celebrate or condemn a piece of pulp cinema. My name is Jack O'Higgins. Joining me is my wonderful co-host, Mark McGann. Mark, say hi.
Hello, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I would hope so. It's your own podcast.
It's always enjoyable to come over to your humble abode and, shoot the shit. I enjoy it.
Why, thank you, Mark. I quite enjoy it too.
I've had, I don't know about you, but I've had a very stressful week.
Oh, really? Why?
I've had a lot of dreams where I was somehow involved in the solving or I was the victim of a child being kidnapped.
What? Why?
Yeah.
Is it each day you've had a dream about
I've had multiple dreams.
revolving around child kidnapping?
Either my child or a child being kidnapped.
And did you save the child or?
No. All ended in tragedy. It was quite upsetting. I think it's because I've been listening to a lot of murder podcasts and stories.
So you've just been dreaming of it's always your child?
Once it was my younger brother who in the dream was my child, but then in another one I just found a child tied up in the boot of a car.
So you were implicated in a kidnapping a couple of times?
No, it was more of somebody else's car, and then I was trying to catch them, but I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the moral of the story is don't go into police work?
Or just don't root around in a stranger's boot, because you never know what you might find.
Yeah, or maybe just don't interact with children in general.
Yeah, I guess not. How was your week?
It was fine. I spent it working on a piece for Totally Dublin about comic book creators.
Nice plug.
Yeah, thank you. We really should save the plugs for at the end of the show, but that's all I've been doing it.
That was subtle. That was very subtle.
Well,
Nobody noticed.
You. Yeah, I guess you could read it. It's in Totally Dublin. Be online or in all good retail shops for free.
Totally Dublin.
They're hopefully they'll be listening, and we'll get a little bit of sponsorship.
Oh, that'd be nice.
I'm only slightly joking.
So, Jack, what film did you pick this week?
Well, I picked Cannibal Holocaust, directed by Ruggero Deodato.
What a wonderful man with a wonderful name. And why, Jack? Why did you pick this film?
Okay, so ever since I was a small child, I've loved horror. I've always been fascinated by horror, and I've always been, for whatever reason, been really fascinated by the transgressive, gross stuff. So even when I was a little young boy, I'd be walking through the corridors, through the halls of the local video store, and I'd always try and find the grossest, nastiest kind of body horror, violent Cronenberg stuff. And then tying into that, I'd always been reading up about the video nasties. Video nasties were a series of about 70 films that the Daily Mail and the Sunday Times kind of drafted into this list of nasty films that had escaped the British Board of Film Classification by coming out straight on video instead of going through cinemas and going through the proper classification. So you had this list of about 70 gory, awful, nasty horror movies. And top of the list was always Cannibal Holocaust. This was a movie I'd always heard about. It had gone down in infamy as one of the most outrageous horror movies ever made. And cut to about 10 years later, I'm a big bad boy at 23, and I was like, I want to watch my first proper video nasty. So I went for the Mac Daddy of them all. I went for Cannibal Holocaust.
And I'm real upset that you did.
Mark, so am I. So am I. Mark, can I just say something starting out? This movie may have killed my interest in exploitation films dead.
I agree. Not quite. I think that maybe were we to kind of scale back, because this was made in 1980. 1980. So I think if we were to go back into the earlier 70s, I'm sure there would have been a lot of kind of nasty stuff that came out in the exploitation film industry, but I think this was taking it to another step.
This is look, I As I say from the get go, I love kind of gross, nasty, extreme stuff. I don't know why I probably wasn't hugged enough as a child, but I've always been fascinated in that stuff, and I hate to go as a knee jerk reaction like this should be banned, or I'm not saying anything should be banned. I think being banned is kind of just not a good way to process like film or art. But if this movie did get banned, I don't think I would cry for 5 seconds about artistic freedom.
No, I do think that this film is genuinely worthless.
It is totally 100% worthless.
Yeah, and I feel like any sort of rating system any kind of quirky rating system we come up with at the end of this,
It's kind of like any quirky rating system is like it's like giving a quirky rating system to an actual Holocaust. Like it feels unsuitable and taking light of something that's generally terrible.
it does. I genuinely was offended by this film, which I'm not normally offended by many things. Some things anger me, but this was where I felt, I feel very offended. I actually recoiled from my screen several parts during this film.
So, yeah, I mean, we should probably actually try and explain what it is before we get into the nuances of it. So, Cannibal Holocaust is described as a splatter/adventure film on Google. I don't quite know what they're thinking there. And basically, it involves this professor going into the Colombian jungles to try and find a film crew that have gone in to shoot a documentary. And as he goes deeper and deeper into the jungle, he witnesses a series of absolute atrocities and then comes back with the footage from the film crew. They've been killed and murdered. And then he brings it back to New York and starts watching it to create a documentary out of it. And the last 40 minutes are essentially just the highlights of all the absolutely horrific stuff they both encounter and inflict on the indigenous tribes themselves.
Mostly inflict.
Mostly inflict.
Let's just talk about the things that maybe I think that the film got right or I enjoyed about the film.
Okay,
we'll start there.
We'll start. This will be a very short warm-up.
Yes, it will. So obviously the film opens with the news broadcast. It's kind of a cliche. It was kind of fun that the news broadcast was like basically saying there are astronauts now, but also there are cannibals. And that was an interesting way to start. It was strange to put the two juxtaposed together like that. In terms of the general frame of the film, we're introduced to the documentary crew. Then it goes to the Professor Monroe, who's kind of tracking them down, and him bringing back the film and showing it to the producers, as we said. And that frame, I think, works to a reasonable degree. It's interesting, and I do enjoy the scenes with Professor Monroe and Mr. Chaco to some extent, although there's a lot wrong in those scenes. And in one of those scenes in particular, or two of those scenes, I recoiled from my screen. So I think the frame is good. Generally, it's okay.
Yeah, it's serviceable.
It's interesting. I think it kind of taps into kind of a Lovecraftian thing, like he sees things that no man should ever see, that sort of thing.
Well, it's certainly racist, like Lovecraft.
Yes, it is certainly racist. And I think other than that, I do enjoy the weird like 60s folk acoustic soundtrack that they have.
That kind of sounds like a Pink Floyd ballad at times.
Yeah, and not sad in any way, kind of calming and cheerful. That soundtracks the scenes of rape and animal mutilation. And were this another film, maybe shot in a different way or scripted in a different way, I might think that, oh, it's interesting how they're juxtaposing these jaunty kind of, or not jaunty, but these kind of nice, calm, peaceful songs or tunes with scenes of horrific violence. But in this film, I just think that the creators were tone deaf.
It just comes across as incredibly obnoxious and kind of wearying after a while. It loses its cute novelty after your first kind of rape, I guess. And unfortunately, that's the kind of terms you talk about in a movie like Cannibal Holocaust. It's which rape or which animal murder did you start to just lose your mind by?
I have a little notebook that I fill with notes on the films that we watch and that we will watch. And most of my notes for this film just say two words: another rape. Most plot points in this film are punctuated by an incredibly violent rape scene.
Yeah, and this is see, this is my problem with this film. I had always heard it was pretty horrendous, and I had heard there was like one graphic rape in it. But I kind of just went into Cannibal Holocaust hoping it would be about cannibals getting back at terrible foreign invaders, which there kind of is a little bit of that in the film. But if you go into this film thinking that there is any kind of trashy, gleeful fun to be gotten from it, you are sorely mistaken. And that's the thing. It makes it hard to even enjoy any of the violence on any of a fun, aesthetic, kind of gross out horror level, because so much of it does revolve around sexual violence to women. You can't even take any kind of fun pulpy thrill out of it, which I suppose is what the filmmakers are going for.
Do you think that Ruggero Deodato making this film so horrific and so obviously obnoxiously violent and disgusting, do you think he was attempting to make some sort of statement about the exploitation film industry?
So here's the thing. Ruggero Deodato says he was inspired to make this movie based on sensational journalistic practices that he had seen in Italian media. And basically, he says that this movie is an attack on sensationalist reporting and manipulative reality TV. But here's the thing. This is one of the most sensationalist and gross films I've ever seen.
And in a way, it works in that capacity, that it's like sensationalism is disgusting and manipulative and exploitation cinema and, as you were saying, journalism, pretty horrendous. But at the same time, this film takes glee in moments like the muskrat scene, which is one that was cut out, I think, in the British release originally, but it's been put back in since, which is essentially when Professor Monroe and Mr. Chaco and his kind of assistant are camping out. His assistant finds a muskrat, small little jungle rodent creature, and he picks it up in his hand and is like, it looks like we're eating muskrat for dinner, in so many words. And then there is a static shot of the muskrat in Mr. Chaco's assistant's hand as the assistant slowly drags a knife through a live animal's body. And the camera doesn't do anything else. It just lingers on this image as this real animal really screams out in agony as it is slaughtered slowly. And it's moments like that in this film where I'm like, this film is not just trying to make a point about sensationalism in journalism or sensationalism in exploitative cinema. This film is genuinely taking glee and like a sociopathic glee in the torture of animals and in the torture of, I mean, mainly women.
It's predominantly women, and that's the thing. I think I wrote that in my notes as well. This is easily the most sadistic film I've ever seen in my life, and it's, as you say, everything is lingering. There is never a single moment where it shows any restraint, or it's shot like pornography, you know. It never doesn't go for the money shot. There is never a single moment where it could ensue kind of a close up or maybe a wide or whatever, that shot to just show you everything. It never doesn't take that, and it never doesn't linger on those shots.
I mean, in particular, the first rape that we see, when it is, again, it's a scene with Professor Monroe and Mr. Chaco, where they see two of the, I believe the tree people, I cannot remember the names of the tribes, the proper names of the tribes, but there's the tree people and the swamp people, basically. And he sees two members of the tree people tribe, a man and a woman. The man is kind of chasing the woman, kind of handling her roughly, throws her down to the ground. He holds up a carved wooden penis, massive wooden penis, and begins raping her with that. Then he creates a spiked ball out of clay. Quite an industrious man, if you say, and begins to rape this poor woman with the spiked ball of clay. And this scene lasts quite a long time. It's a couple of minutes that you're watching this rape, and the main character is the protagonist, who's supposed to be kind of the moral center of the story. He's saying, don't publish the documentary. By the end, he's saying, don't publish this documentary, you know, it's disgusting, it's horrendous. He stands there and he watches it, and he kind of goes to stop it, and then Mr. Checker says, nah, man. And he's like, oh, all right, we'll just watch.
And that's the thing, I guess the movie is, sometimes I feel like it's almost trying to say something about voyeurism. Maybe trying to say something about audiences being implicit in watching exploitation films or watching kind of gross or exploitative reporting in the media. But as you say, it just takes too much damn glee and everything. I mean, I can't help but imagine the director being like, this is gas, isn't it? We've got something really crazy here, haven't we? Like,
Deodato was rock hard.
Oh, yeah.
Film. He was rock hard. I have no doubt. I mean, he does it, like, it seems that the camera takes such joy in showing these scenes. And even if, like, maybe initially that was the intention, was to kind of show up voyeurism and sensationalism and things like that, I think even the fact that we both know about this film as a video nasty, and the fact that all the marketing tends to skew towards that, how disgusting this film is, I think that basically just disregards the point that this is anything but just another exploitation movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a snuff film. It is a snuff film.
It is a snuff film that just no one managed to die while making. That's it. Although it's funny enough, he was actually accused of murder. He was charged with murder. He had to actually bring the cast into court, and he had to show off one of the effects to a jury to show that he hadn't actually murdered people.
Which effect was it?
It was the one at the end with the woman being impaled on the spike.
Ah.
Yeah. For me, there are occasional moments where it almost feints towards an interesting theme. It's kind of, who's the real savages? Is it these American assholes coming in and ruining your village, or is it these people who have different customs to you and I, but to them it's perfectly natural? And it's trying to play this moral relativism card the whole time, but it doesn't really work, even though I think that would be an interesting idea for a movie, and it's an idea that has been mined by many different movies. But the problem with this movie trying to do that is that on the one side you have the tribes, and they're a horribly racist caricature of pure uncivilized savagery. So you can find it absolutely repellent, the representation of these people in the film, but you can't really side with the absolutely horrible things they do, specifically to their women. And then on the other hand, you have the Americans, who are either totally indifferent to what is going on, as Mr. Chaco and Professor Monroe, or you have the documentarians, who you find out in the second half of the movie, once you start to see their documentary, that not only have they been watching certain atrocities, but they have actually been encouraging them by burning villages, destroying and murdering animals, real animals, by the way, that are the food source for the village, and then at the climax of the movie, raping some of the women in the village. So they're cartoonishly evil Americans. And again, you can say it's a metaphor for colonialism or what have you, or the rape of the natural world, but it's only equal because the film portrays everyone as an absolute inhumane piece of shit. There is no moral grey. It's just everyone is absolutely terrible.
It is an incredibly misanthropic film. I mean, I think it's more misogynist than it is misanthropic, but it's an incredibly misanthropic film. Everybody is a shit. Everybody is pretty awful. But the natives are too naive and simple. In the context of the film, the natives are framed as too naive and simple to realize that what they're doing is wrong. And I think like the setting up as Professor Monroe as the moral center, the one who says no to airing the documentary, his kind of understanding of the natives is that, oh, they're only doing this because this is their culture, this is how they understand how to act. Like, we shouldn't judge them for it. And I feel like that is how the film frames them, that it infantilizes these cultures that do these horrific things. I mean, they're stereotypes of cultures, of course, but yeah, I think that apart from Professor Monroe, I mean, obviously Professor Monroe is despicable in my eyes, but and I think in most modern audiences' eyes, but apart from Professor Monroe, the film views everybody else as despicable.
I would struggle to think of one moment of basic, not even kindness or decency, even civility in this film. There is not one moment of basic humanity in the film. Well, just even someone holding a door open for someone else. One more positive thing I can say about it, and then again, this is in the opening 5 minutes that gave me way too much hope. Some genuinely great on location shooting. Because they did go to an actual Colombian rainforest. They went
to Guyana, wasn't it?
Yeah. Guyana, yeah. Or it's in the Amazon, yeah. And a lot of the tribespeople in the film are actually indigenous people, which is great visually for some scenes, but then you also realize what utter exploitation it is of these.
Visually it's great, but I do want to talk about the representation of the Amazon people in this film, because I think it's interesting the way that they are framed and the way that they are set up. So I have a note here just in terms of when I was initially watching the movie. I take my notes chronologically, and the first thing that I did notice about the indigenous people in this film is that they're represented as feral and completely animalistic, and they're also kind of completely uniform. They're seen as like there's one of the things that the film said, one of the things that we take for granted as humans is that we're all individual. And I think the setting up of in a film or in a visual medium, the setting up of any character or group of characters as completely the same or as very, very similar, as uniform, sets that group of characters up as monstrous. And this film does that quite well in that, I mean, the initial look at the indigenous people, they all have the same haircut. They're all wearing the same clothes. They're all doing the same thing. They're all nibbling on little bones, probably human meat. And throughout the film, the indigenous people never speak. They chant. They have some sort of religious chant. They wail, and they make gestures, and they kind of dance around a little bit, but they never speak. And it's interesting in that Professor Monroe he kind of talks about, oh, I communicated with them, or I talked to them and I asked them this and they told me this, but never on film are we shown that happening. It's always in Professor Monroe's narration that we're told that he spoke to them. We are never shown the indigenous people conversing, which is important because it sets them up as bestial. And I think that's kind of a core point in the message of the film, is that these indigenous people are monstrous and they are animalistic and they have a lack of understanding and they're naive and they're not adults. And it's not even just infantilizing, it's animalizing. It's turning them into monsters and animals as opposed to people.
Yeah.
Which is why there is definitely an imbalance. I know you said earlier that everybody was awful in this film, and I agree, but I think there's definitely an imbalance in the way that monstrosity is represented. Whereas the monstrosity of the documentarians is, it's exploitative, and they're
Basically, they're at least human.
They're human.
Yeah.
They're obviously humans exploiting this landscape and this world. But the Amazonians, the tree people and the swamp people, are monstrous.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing, is just what because after I watched this film, I tried to visualize in my head who the fuck would defend it. Because I genuinely was, I watched the film, I was pretty fucking bummed and horrified, but I was like, you know what, film is subjective, maybe I can read some kind of take that could somewhat justify it. And everyone goes to this whole, it's rape of the natural world, it's a colonial tale, it's about exploitation of foreign lands and tribes. But as you say, it doesn't hold any water, because the film is so intense. It's, as you say, demonizing and making monsters out of these indigenous people that you can't for a second believe that you're supposed to sympathize with them in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I think maybe there's an element where you can sympathize, but you can never empathize with them. You can never feel the same as the Amazonian people feel. You can only sympathize. You as you would an animal that was in pain, or that was hurt, or that was defending itself. Yeah, you're like, oh, good.
I would argue dogs actually are humanized more than these people are in films.
That's what it's like. It's like, oh, good. This feral pack of dogs is getting its own back against these humans that hurt it. But that's basically the way the Amazonians are framed. And even so, we get our first look at the the Amazonians. They're kind of feral, kind of animalistic, uniform. And then when Professor Monroe and Chaco first go out in the jungle, the first creatures they meet are spider monkeys, like running through the trees. And it is uncanny, the representation or the presentation of the spider monkeys and of the indigenous tribe that is first encountered. It's like, it's uncanny because it's uniform. They're all howling. They're running around. It's chaotic. And it is the exact same representation as we get for the Amazonians in the scene where the army guys are first introduced to the Amazons. So they are literally mirrored in the animal kingdom. They are animals in this film, which is
not good.
No, it's one of the reasons this film is utterly despicable.
And you know what? It actually really frightens me that this movie is still such a thing, and it's still held, and for what it is, it's still held in a fairly high regard. I mean, this is a fairly well-known movie. This shows up on a lot of best horrors of all times. Total Film has put it in their best horrors of all times. Wired has put it in their best horrors of all times.
Movies to watch before you die.
This is, I mean, that is essentially the reason why I picked this for the podcast, is because it has had such a huge legacy over the years. And it's funny because I was reading something recently. It's 40% of all VHS films will never go to DVD, and then even less of those will go to Blu-ray. So every year, we're losing many films to rights, or just you wouldn't make money out of putting it on DVD or Blu-ray. This film has survived. This film is on Blu-ray. It's gotten Arrow Films releases with all the bells and jangles and all that stuff on it, special features, retrospectives on it. People still are fascinated by this film, and I'm kind of watching it now in this day and age being like, why?
I completely agree. The whole way through watching this film, I was asking that question. And when I was saying earlier about kind of things that I liked about the film, like the frame and the characterization, and even to some extent the soundtrack, I was clutching at straws. I was trying very hard to find things of merit in this film. But I would say that right now I would never watch this film again, and I would prefer not to watch anything like it again.
This is just one of those films you come out of and you genuinely feel bad. It makes you feel bad about people and the things people think and the things they're capable of turning into a 90-minute film for cheap profit. You just feel pretty fucking terrible after watching it. Interesting thing about this film, though, it is considered one of the first mockumentary films ever made. which I kind of like. It's really fascinating that this movie, in part, contributed to cinematic visual language.
It contributed to This is Spinal Tap. It contributed to What We Do in the Shadows. That is, I am flabbergasted. This is the only way I can say. You know what? Take everything I said back. I'm glad for this movie. I'm glad it exists. I'm happy it was an inspiration for all of those great films that I love. Do you agree, Jack?
Oh, you want to know my thoughts on the film?
Just yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna quote the second last line of the film. I want this film burned, all of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't fault you in that assessment of this film.
Should people, under any circumstances, watch this film?
I've struggled with this question over the past few days because I've thought to myself, should I have watched this film? Like, did I gain anything from this film? And I would say no. A resounding no. I did not gain anything from this film. But do I tell people not to watch this film? No. Because that is exactly what the marketers want us to do. They want us to sit down with people and say, never watch Cannibal Holocaust. Because that's why people watch Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
It's a shitty film. It adds nothing to cinema.
Yeah.
And to say that don't watch it means that there's something of worth here, which there is not.
Yeah.
So I think the best thing to do with this film is just to not mention it.
Yeah. If they did a remake of The Ring and they put in the videotape, it would just be the uncut version of Cannibal Holocaust. It is a curse. It is a pox. And it gets by, just like you were saying, it is a social virus in film, I think. Because it is exactly that. It's like, this is the goriest and most horrendous film of all time. And of course, any horror fan or anyone who's into extreme stuff wants to check it out. But I cannot emphasize how much you will regret that.
Because it's the closest thing a horror fan can get to an illegally made snuff film where somebody gets actually murdered on screen.
Yeah.
Without being completely ostracized from society. It's pop snuff. And it's disgusting and despicable and ultimately worthless as a piece of cinema and as a piece of art.
And I want to say something in closing. What really makes this movie so utterly despicable isn't the fact that it's necessarily graphic, though at times it is very graphic. It's that it's misanthropic, it's racist, it's misogynistic, it's just all around sadistic, and it just hates human beings. And that's really, at the end of the day, what makes this such an awful film that you should never watch.
Although, one more good point about this movie. There's a lot of nude women in the movie. There's also a lot of nude men.
That's the one thing. It's really weird. There is a fair amount of penis.
A lot of dick.
A lot of dick in this film.
And I think, if there's one thing we can take away from this film, it's that we should have more equal representation of nude bodies in cinema.
That is one thing I can wholeheartedly agree with and enjoy about this film.
Yeah.
An equal amount of penis.
Maybe less muskrat and pig killing on.
I could have done with more penis. Did you notice actually when the professor's bathing with the women, he has an actual semi at one stage?
I didn't notice.
He does. He has. I mean, I can't blame him. He's dancing with scantily clad women.
Yeah, I mean, he's having a great time, and then he finds that dead body, which is kind of sad. So, how many severed penises out of 5 would you give this film?
Genuinely, I think I would probably give it none. I think I try very hard to find something good in the worst films and something bad in the best films, but even the small glimmers of good stuff just are kind of overwritten by just how just stupid and nasty it is.
As one of my lecturers said to me, in third year of my college degree. This film has not done enough to earn a grade. I cannot grade this film.
I would agree. I would agree. And can I just say one more thing? It's dumb. That's the thing. It's a dumb film. It's dumb.
Film.
It's dumb. I just really want to emphasize as well. It's dumb. It's stupid. It's not smart. It's nowhere near as smart as it thinks it is. It's dumb.
I drew a little portrait of the lead character in this film at the end of my notes.
I knew you would love that pipe.
And there was a little with a little speech bubble saying, "I wonder who the real cannibals are."
That
and I feel like that's the point of the film.
That annoyed me so much. The sheer gall to have this like parade of atrocities and then put on your 15-year-old philosophizing at the end. I was like, the sheer gall of you, sir. Good day. Good day.
But I mean, now that we've finished, I feel like we finished reviewing this film. I think I don't want to say any more about Cannibal Holocaust. No. I was about to say it's shit, but I don't want to say that even. Okay, so I think we should talk about the positive things in our life. Obviously, you can find us on various social medias. At mm.roger on Instagram, you will find that I have just re-released or reprinted my first comic, Not Usually Harmful, which you can buy for, it's just a $5. You may as well just support a struggling artist.
It's starving
artist. You can buy that on my Big Cartel store. It's pretty fun. Jack got it. What do you think, Jack? Do you think it's fun?
I love it. I think it's really gross, and there's a lot of odd, awkward humans in it.
But not as gross as Cannibal Holocaust.
No. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. And there are actual human beings in it, and it's quite poignant and sad at parts, but also really funny and gross at others. It's everything I want out of a comic book.
And do you have things that you want to plug? I believe you do.
Oh well. Wow, this has just been a great week for us all. Yes, I have spent the last 2 weeks interviewing up-and-coming indie comic book creators in Dublin, and they're going to be...
Not me, though.
Not. It's a conflict of interest. That's the only reason.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I've been interviewing for indie comic creators around Dublin, and that is going to be published as a feature in Totally Dublin for this August. So I'm really excited about that.
And yeah, I'm excited too. I can't wait.
Yeah, I should say you can read it online or in any good, hip, cool cafe or shop. You'll normally find free copies of it lying around. So grab one, grab two, grab three, share them with your family. Give them to anyone you pass on the street.
If anybody has passed away in your family, leave them at their grave.
Exactly. Because you never know who will be going by their grave.
And maybe, in the afterlife...
Bookmark it to my feature and just leave it over your Nana's grave.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's everything. Mark, where can I find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Grigory Pilgrim, or just search Unutterable Loathing. You'll find me there on Twitter. Or, as I said, mm.roger on Instagram. What about yourself, Jack?
That is so great. I am at Jacko Higgins on Twitter. It's HIGGINZ, because you have to keep it cool with the kids.
Of course.
Kids with a Z as well. And then I'm on Instagram at Jeremiah Jeffries, where you can see pictures of me at gigs, but also pictures of me with puke.
The best kind of pictures.
Trying to cover both.
Milky white puke. And with that, we will leave you. This has been Pulp Fictions with Jack and Mark. I hope you enjoyed listening to us talk shit about a shitty movie for about 30-40 minutes. We'll see how it gets edited down.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you know, why did they give the guy they had captive coke?
I think that's also a stereotype of like Aztec Incan kind of guys that used to take a lot of coke so they run real far.
Oh wow! That was kind of one of the few humorous elements of the movie, and that was based on racism as well. Up to something. She